Welcome to the Deep Dive, the show where we take some compelling research and really boil it down to what you need to know. Today, we're diving into a question that feels, well, increasingly urgent. What does it actually mean for a graduate to be employable in, this rapidly changing world? Now, if your first thought is just a list of skills on a CV, well, get ready for maybe a bit of a perspective shift. Our guide for this deep dive is a really insightful paper. It's called Capability Reconceptualized, Towards a Landscape of Practice Approach in Graduate Employability. It's by Behnam Soltani and Karsten Zegwaard. And their work, it really challenges some common ideas and offers, I think, a much richer way to look at this.
That's absolutely right. Our mission today really is to unpack how employability is so much more complex than just ticking off a list of skills. We're going to explore it as a dynamic, kind of ongoing social process. And it's deeply tied to how you construct your professional identity, within all the different communities you interact with throughout your career journey.
Okay, let's unpack this then, because it sounds like we're about to challenge some maybe deeply held beliefs about what employability really means. And I suspect you might find it really shifts your perspective quite a bit. So let's start with a common understanding. Many universities, higher education institutions, when they talk about getting students ready for work, they often focus on these lists, right? Lists of capabilities. You've definitely seen them: communication, teamwork, initiative, problem solving. It's everywhere, almost the default way of thinking.
Exactly. And while, those skills sound good individually, this paper offers a pretty strong critique of that traditional skill set approach.
Sure.
They argue it's just too rigid. It lacks direction, especially in such an uncertain economy. In fact, they call it conceptually, theoretically, practically, and evidently problematic. That's quite a statement. The main point is that just listing skills doesn't capture the dynamic reality of finding and keeping work today. And what's really fascinating is how the whole idea, the concept of employability, has broadened out so much. It's moved way beyond just technical skills. It's not just about your resume anymore. It includes things like, well, who you are as a professional, your identity, your social capital, your cultural capital, your networks, even this idea of being a good citizen, contributing to society, not just getting a paycheck. It's a really holistic shift from just what you can do to who you are and how you connect.
Okay, so if employability is so much bigger than a checklist,
Yeah.
how does someone actually, build this broader capability? How do you navigate your career path with this different view?
Well, this brings us right to the core framework of the paper. They talk about the landscape of practice, or LOFP, and within that, communities of practice, or COFPs. So first, what's a community of practice? Basically, it's a group of people, right? They share a common interest, maybe a goal. They interact regularly, engage with each other, and over time, they develop this shared way of doing things, shared knowledge, skills, experiences. Think about maybe a software team working together, or a group of specialist doctors, or even something like a local photography club sharing techniques. Those are all COFPs. And then the landscape of practice, the LOFP, is like the bigger picture. It's a complex map made up of lots of different interconnected communities of practice. It's defined by shared practices, sure, but also by the boundaries between these communities, how they overlap, how they connect. The focus isn't just on an individual skills locked inside them, but on the practice itself, this dynamic interplay of knowing and doing that brings people together across this landscape.
Okay. So that highlights a really key shift the paper pushes for, this practice-based approach.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of looking at fixed internal skills, it focuses on what students actually do and produce in a real workplace setting. So looking at tangible things like the emails they write, the reports they generate, presentations, seeing those as actions, as products created within a specific social context. So if your career is like a journey across these landscapes, success isn't just collecting skill badges. It's about getting good at navigating, right? Connecting between these different professional worlds.
Exactly. And you can even see higher education itself as a kind of landscape of practice. It's a complex system, isn't it? You've got academic departments, student clubs, research labs, employer partnerships, alumni networks. All these different coteries are constantly influencing, sometimes subtly, sometimes not so subtly, how a student learns and how their professional identity takes shape.
Right. And this isn't just abstract theory, is it? The paper gets into some really compelling real-world examples that make these ideas click.
Definitely. The paper really reframes capability. It's not seen as just a collection of skills added together. Instead, they call it a social construct, which means You build capabilities by actually participating in the practices of your community of practice. And crucially, by showing you understand and can work within that community's norms, its ways of doing things. It's about engagement and demonstrating know-how within that group context. And that ties directly into building your professional identity. You see, learners aren't just passively absorbing skills, they're actively constructing who they are professionally. They do this by, well, performing to the standards expected in their field, by internalizing the norms and values, developing that sense of belonging. And the outcome isn't just competence, it's someone who can think critically, make good judgments, and importantly, be self-directed in their work and their ongoing learning.
That dynamic view feels so much more relevant today, doesn't it? Especially when you think about the uncertain job market. You know, full-time, lifelong jobs aren't the only path anymore. There's more short-term work, gig work, self-employment. This model seems better suited to preparing people for that kind of flexibility.
And the paper backs this up with a specific study, right? They followed students over time.
Yes, exactly. They conducted a longitudinal study with 8 Master of Professional Practice MPP students in New Zealand. These students came from really diverse backgrounds, different disciplines, and they all did these significant work-based projects. So the researchers could really watch how their capabilities and professional identities developed using things like narrative frames, interviews, observations, real in-depth stuff.
Okay, so what did they actually find? How are these capabilities built in practice? Well, the study showed it's a really dynamic process involving several key things that emerged from the students' experiences. One really big finding was about boundaries. The boundaries between different communities, they're not just barriers, they are actually critical places for learning. Huge opportunities, really.
That's interesting. Not just obstacles, but learning sites. I remember one example they gave. It was a male student from New Zealand working on a commercial prototype for his master's project. Academically, in that community, he got great feedback. Thumbs up. But then he took it to the business community, a totally different coffee, right? And bam, he immediately saw he needed more features, was quite market ready. So that boundary, that encounter, forced him to adapt, to strategize, and ultimately to make his product much better. It pushed his capability. Yeah, that makes sense. Or there's that other anecdote, the Filipino female student getting used to public transport in New Zealand. Apparently where she came from saying hi or thanks to the bus driver wasn't the norm. But in NZ, she saw others doing it, felt the social expectation perhaps, and started doing it herself. What's so striking about that small detail, to me, it shows how even everyday cultural things create these boundaries that require adaptation. And that shapes your social capability, your ability to navigate different regimes of competence, as the paper calls them. Basically, the unwritten rules of different groups.
Absolutely. And another key point was about multi-memberships. Learning doesn't just happen in one place. It happens through participating and interacting in multiple communities of practice, both online and offline.
Right. You saw that so clearly with the students, like the New Zealand guy who described himself juggling roles. He was a lecturer in motorcycle clubs, a band, family, friends, constantly shifting gears between these different communities and learning from each one. And the Filipino female student, too. She was a talent acquisition business partner, active in her church, a student, and in online social groups. Using those groups for everything from visa questions to like cooking tips. These multiple memberships, they really shape your identity and your capabilities because you're always adjusting to different rules, different expectations in each space.
And something that came through really strongly was the need for resilience. It's absolutely vital for learning and gaining knowledge in these complex landscapes of practice, and it seems to be built through, well, deep engagement, both emotionally and cognitively, especially when you hit those inevitable challenges.
Yeah, there was that quote from the Chinese female student that really stuck with me. She said something like, "You must be resilient and have a desire to learn something. Pick up from others and, to put inside your heart, inside your body, then from inside out and become your own language."
Yeah.
That idea of embodying knowledge, not just knowing it intellectually, that's powerful. It's like it becomes part of you.
Exactly. It's that deeper internalization.
And another student, the Romanian female student, she reflected on how her varied job history made her feel quite resilient and versatile. It really underlines that resilience isn't just some innate trait you either have or don't. It's a socially embedded process, something you develop through navigating different situations, different interactions.
The study also showed how students build capabilities by tackling problems head-on within their communities. It's not just about having the answer, it's about being proactive, knowing who to ask for help, and maybe just as importantly, how to ask effectively within that community's culture.
Oh yeah, the sushi shop example.
Yeah.
The Chinese female student again, right.
Yeah.
Everything was new to her there. But she didn't just freeze. She had this systematic approach. She'd identify the problem, watch how experienced colleagues did it, look stuff up online, or ask the manager. Then she'd practice, reflect on how it went, adjust, and move forward. That iterative, active problem solving, that seems crucial for building real competence.
It really is. And connecting that back to the LOFP idea, sometimes these new experiences, these problems that don't quite fit the community's current way of doing things, they can actually trigger the whole community to kind of rethink its own definition of competence. It forces a renegotiation almost. So the community itself learns and evolves along with the individual. It's a dynamic loop. And building on that, the paper talks about learning as a trajectory in a social landscape. It's this idea that you're constantly moving between different communities of practice, adapting to new cultures, new norms as you go. It's a journey of integration.
There was a great quote from one of the Filipino male students about that. He said, from one community to another, there will always be adapting mechanisms that you will need to be doing within yourself. And he also noted that learning is deeply intertwined with thinking and communicating. It really emphasizes that it's not just about absorbing facts. It's about becoming part of new social spaces and learning how to participate effectively there.
Which leads nicely into this concept they call knowledge utility. It's a bit different from just knowledge. Think of it as being sort of in the know across different professional circles or communities. It doesn't mean you have to be an expert in every single practice across the whole landscape. That's impossible. But it does mean being able to understand, appreciate, and talk about what's happening in other relevant communities of practice, even if you're not a full member. Being able to bridge those gaps, connect the dots. That's key to becoming what they call a trustworthy practitioner. Someone who can collaborate effectively across the wider professional world.
That makes a lot of sense. It's about understanding the bigger picture.
And finally, the study really highlighted the importance of conveners. These are people who essentially mediate your learning. They help you navigate the landscape of practice. And crucially, they aren't just your formal teachers or supervisors. They can be anyone who shapes your learning journey, mentors, peers, even family.
Right. The Filipino male student, again, he talked about his parents being his first conveners, how they monitored learning, how they valued education, taught him life skills, showed him how to interact, how to network. And he also said something really interesting about his school teachers. He remembered them more for how they related to the students, their connection, than the specific subject matter they taught, which really underlines the social, relational aspect of learning.
That personal connection matters.
And another student, the Filipino female student, mentioned her academic facilitator. By encouraging regular reflection, this facilitator helped her become a much more independent, self-directed learner.
Yeah, and what's really key here is that conveners don't just pass on information. They actively help reconfigure the landscape, as the paper puts it. They can create new learning opportunities, make connections, and ultimately empower learners to become independent, capable navigators of their own professional paths.
Okay, so let's try and bring this all together. This deep dive, it really shows that graduate employability, well, it isn't some static checklist of skills you just tick off. It's much more of a dynamic social journey, isn't it? It's about developing capabilities and your professional identity through constant engagement, through negotiating boundaries between groups, building resilience when things get tricky, and reflecting thoughtfully across this whole complex landscape of practice.
Exactly, and through all these processes, participating, negotiating, reflecting individuals engage with multiple communities. They demonstrate their knowledgeability, their understanding of different ways of working, different regimes of competence, and ultimately they build and express a capable identity. They show they're a trustworthy practitioner, someone who can navigate both the familiar and the unfamiliar in the professional world.
So thinking about this, what does it all mean for you, the listener? Maybe next time you find yourself entering a new group, could be a new project team at work, joining a volunteer group, even just a different social circle, or moving to a new place. Take a moment. Think about how you're navigating the boundaries there. How are you figuring out the rules? How are you solving problems, making connections? How is your journey through all these different communities shaping who you are becoming, both professionally and personally? It's a continuous process.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. We really hope you've gained some valuable new ways to think about what it means to be truly capable and employable in today's world.